Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to PwC's Risk and Regulation news channel and welcome to the first video of 2025. 2025 actually started in the same way as 2024 ended. There are a lot of very exciting and interesting risk and regulation topics for banks, and of course we will continue to cover them in this news channel. There is the nice tradition on this channel that the first video of each year we cover the SREP results of the ECB and also the supervisory priorities of the ECB, and I think we should continue with this tradition. So today we will speak about the supervisory review and evaluation process and the results of 2024 and these priorities of the ECB. And like always, I'm not doing it alone. Today we have two experts here with me in the studio. The first one you know from many videos, previous videos that we did before. It's Stefan Röth, director here in the PwC office in Frankfurt.
Glad
Stefan.
to be here and happy to continue with our tradition.
Great. And the second expert we have today here with us, I'm very proud to have him back on this channel. It's Gregory Joos, partner from our PwC office in Brussels. Gregory, how are you? Happy New Year.
Thank you, Martin. Also, Happy New Year to you. Well, already a lot happened in 2025, so it promises to be a very interesting year. So very happy to join you and Stefan today.
Great to have you here, Gregory. So, starting with the SREP results 2024. Maybe for those of you who are not so familiar with the SREP process, what is the SREP process? Actually, the overall interaction during 1 year between the ECB and the banks is summarized in a report. And at the end of these reports, the banks actually get a grade on how the bank was performing in the fulfillment of regulatory requirements and how happy the ECB was with the behavior of the banks. And grades, that sounds a little bit strange. It sounds a little bit like as if there is a teacher and a pupil. Yeah, but it's really a little bit like this because the ECB always gives homework to the banks. So all these regulatory requirements, guidelines, and ad hoc data requests, the ECB checks if the banks were doing that on time and in the right quality. So it's really like homework in a school. And there are also exams, most notably the ECB EBA stress test that has to be performed every 2 years, but also a lot of on-site missions that the ECB is performing when they want to check if the banks really fulfill all the regulatory requirements. Of course, similar to the behavior of a teacher with his pupil, there are a lot of interactions, discussions, because the teacher wants to know if the pupil is making enough progress. So that is done during the whole year. And in the end, as I said before, there is one final grade. And speaking about this final grade, Stefan, you made a very detailed analysis of the SREP report 2024. Maybe you can give us a quick overview.
Happy to do so. And first thing to note is that it's good that you've said it's the results 2024, because otherwise people might confuse them with the results 2023. At first glance, they look quite similar. In one moment, when we turn to the supervisory priorities, we will note some small but interesting changes. But when it comes to the grades, the overall picture is as we know it, and that's not a big surprise given that the SREP process has been established for quite some time and nobody would expect tectonic shifts from 1 year to the other. What we can see when looking at the grades is that banks cluster in the middle, grades 2 to 3, that is where more and more banks find themselves. So there are little outliers. There are less banks that receive a grade of 4, and there are still, as in last year, no banks that are graded 1.
Yeah, the grades in the end of the year are, of course, very important, but there's another very important information included in the SREP letters of the ECB, and that is the total individual capital requirement. And that is published also within the SREP report. Maybe, Stefan, a few words about that. How were the individual capital requirements developing in 2024?
Yes, the average Pillar 2 requirement set by the ECB has increased from 15.5% to, hold your breath, 15.6% this year. So similar to the grades, very little movement. But two things I think are worth mentioning. First is that we've seen a tiny increase in Pillar 2 requirements, and that is a long-standing trend. Pillar 2 requirements have been increasing steadily over the last couple of years, with the ECB wanting to prepare banks for the next crisis by slowly but continuously forcing them to hold more capital. Second interesting thing to note is that I believe next year we will see a greater shift, because on the one hand side, the ECB has changed the SREP process, and these changes were introduced together with the results. And secondly, next year for the first time, the Pillar 2 requirement will need to take into account also the CRR3 output floor, and that may mean that we will see more changes as this time around.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Yeah, capital is definitely important, but it's not everything. Yeah, I mean, of course, it's the sharpest instrument of the ECB when they want to motivate or force banks to fulfill certain regulatory requirements. But it's not everything. And there are always a lot of qualitative measures included in the SREP letters. Maybe here you could give us a quick overview. What are the most important qualitative measures that the banks received from the ECB?
Yes, sure. As in the last years, the ECB, of course, uses qualitative measures to tell banks precisely at which points ECB is unhappy and banks what banks need to do to change that. And also, as in previous years, we see the majority of these qualitative findings in the areas of credit risk on the one hand side, governance on the other hand side, because these are also the two elements where the SREP mostly focuses on, where the banks receive the baddest grades, in particular when it comes to governance. And so these are, of course, the areas where the ECB expects banks to be working on.
Great. Thank you very much, Stefan. So moving away now from the SREP report 2024 and looking to the supervisory priorities for 2025 and the years beyond. So what is the teaching program of the ECB? And there are altogether 3 priorities this year. And the first one deals with the macroeconomic situation within the EU and the Eurozone, and also the impact of the geopolitical tensions. So very interesting to look at this priority from the ECB. And Gregory, you are our expert and sitting at the source of information when it comes to the economic developments in the EU. Maybe you can give us a quick overview. What is the current status within the EU regarding the economic outlook and how it might impact the banks within the EU and the Eurozone?
Yes, Martin. Well, let's first go back to December 2024 when the ECB issued their priorities. At that moment, the main concern was the growth on the short term. In the meantime, that concern has been confirmed. Eurostat published last week growth figures for the EU, the European Union as a whole, and there we see a flat growth for the Union, with negative growth in important countries like France, Germany, and also Ireland. And that, well, in the US, we see positive growth of 0.6% for the last quarter of 2024. This has also been confirmed by PwC's yearly CEO survey, where, for example, for Belgium, which is an open economy, only 34% of CEOs expect growth in the 12 coming months. Well, on the longer term, the ECB still expects a moderate growth, but with a lot of uncertainties and a higher probability that tail risks will materialize. This uncertainty and the short-term weakening growth increases the focus of the ECB on credit risk management and the ability of banks to identify in a timely manner asset quality deterioration. And that, of course, in order to ensure adequate provisioning levels.
Thank you very much, Gregory. Extremely interesting. There's a second part of the first priority of the ECB, and that is with regard to the geopolitical tensions. And there are really a lot of geopolitical tensions right now, starting with the conflict in the Ukraine. We have the Middle East conflict. We have Taiwan, and also, yes, we have the change in the administration in the US that might impact the economy as well. Maybe you can give us here also an overview how these tensions might impact the economy and therefore also the banks within the EU and the Eurozone.
Well, Martin, geopolitical risks indeed impact the macro-financial developments. This is, for example, the case with the trade tariffs which have recently been announced by President Trump. But the concern is much broader, since it can also impact the operating environment for banks. Over the past years, we have seen an increasing number of IT and cyber incidents. And although banks have gained in maturity in this respect, we see an increasing dependency of banks on third parties, and also increasing concentration risks towards certain of these third parties. This is, for example, the case for the big techs. The concern is shared by the ECB, and we will see an increased focus on the resilience for banks and their ability to react to geopolitical shocks. This is, of course, a new risk driver, which requires new approaches, new techniques, such as, for example, scenario analysis.
Wow, Gregory, extremely interesting. Let us move now to the second priority. And here I would like to ask again a question to Stefan, because the second priority is a little bit strange, I must say, because the second priority is about the remediations of findings of the previous years. And here, especially with a focus on ESG risk management and governance. Stefan, does it mean that the banks were not doing a good job in the past on these two topics?
It's indeed interesting to note that in the past, this second priority has always been termed something like governance and ESG, and now the ECB quite bluntly called it, let me quote, the remedy of persistent material shortcomings in an effective and timely manner. And the ECB also within the report speaks about from risk identification to remediation. So basically the message to the banks is, we've told you times and again where the problem is, now go do something about it. And as you already pointed out, ESG and risk data aggregation are the two most prominent topics here, where the ECB is of the opinion that banks are not doing enough, even though they have been repeatedly told to do that. And in both cases, the ECB quite bluntly hints also at what will come next, in particular permanent penalty payments to make the banks move on these two areas.
Especially these penalties, but also mentioning these two topics as a priority for the upcoming years should be a huge motivation for the banks really to work on these two topics. But now looking to the last priority of the ECB for the upcoming years, digitalization. Wow, that's of course a huge field with a lot of subcategories. So Stefan, you have to explain us a little bit more in detail, what does the ECB means with digitalization, and on which aspects of digitalization the ECB focuses?
Yeah, once again, there is two aspects to this. The first one, obviously, is cybersecurity and digital resilience. We've seen the entry into force of DORA in the EU in recent days, and this is one important element of digitalization. The other one, of course, is adapting a bank's business model to a digitalized world. And that means, in particular, investing in systems, investing in a digital customer journey, making banks being able to compete with new companies entering the market like the neobanks or even the big tech companies. And once again, the ECB is not very subtle in telling the banks that they should use the profit made in recent years from the increase in interest rates to move on these strongly required, strongly recommended investments in the area of digitalization.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for this overview about the priorities of the ECB in the upcoming years. When I look to both the SREP results in 2024 and the supervisory priorities, I'm 100% sure that the next years are going to be very exciting and busy again. And of course, we are more than happy to cover these topics in this channel and to support you within the implementation. If you have any further questions regarding the SREP results or the supervisory priorities, do not hesitate to contact us here directly within the SSM EBA office of PwC or your country leaders. All the contact details are, like always, included on our webpage. The link to our webpage is included in the comments of this video, so feel free to contact us. And I hope that we meet soon in the next video. And thank you very much again to Stefan, Gregory. It was great to have you again here on one video. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.